With Kroger brand products from Baker's, you can make all your favorite things this holiday season. Because Kroger brand's proven quality products come at exceptionally low prices. And with a money-back quality guarantee, every dish is sure to be a favorite.
These are a few of my favorite things.
Whether you shop delivery, pickup, or in-store, Kroger brand has all your favorite things. Baker's, fresh for everyone.
Ah, the sounds of the holiday.
Ho, ho, ho.
Because when you open a College Savings Iowa account, you're giving a child the gift of education to help pay for college and trade schools. You get a tax break and peace of mind for whatever's ahead. Register before December 31st, and you could be one of 2 lucky winners to get $5,290. College Savings Iowa. Sounds like success. Visit collegesavingsiowa.com today. Administered by the State Treasurer of Iowa.
Today's show is brought to you by ExpressVPN. Protect your online activity today and find out how you can get 3 months free at tryexpressvpn.com/space. That's tryexpressvpn.com/space for 3 months free with a 1-year package. Visit tryexpressvpn.com/space to learn more.
15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 10, 9. Ignition sequence start.
Space Nuts.
5, 4, 3, 2.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Space Nuts.
Astronauts report it feels good.
Hi there, thanks for joining us once again for another star-studded edition of Space Nuts. My name's Andrew Dunkley, and with us, as always, is Professor Fred Watson. Hi, Fred.
Hey, how are you doing?
I am well, thanks. How are you?
What's your name again? Oh, Andrew, yeah.
Just call me Fred.
Yeah, that'll do. Oh, it's Dave usually, isn't it?
Fred Nurk. My mum always used to say Fred Nurk.
Yeah, that's right. A well-known Goon Show character.
Yeah, that's right. Now, we've got a lot to talk about today, and we've got 2 double bunger questions coming up, one about the expanding universe, and a couple of people asking similar questions about Venus after last week's episode, so we'll try and solve all their problems. We're also going to look at the first all-female spacewalk in the wake of the passing of the first ever spacewalker, Alexei Leonov, and an update on the last mass extinction 66 million years ago. They think they know for sure, almost maybe, what caused it. So we'll focus on that as well. But Fred, first of all, the all-female spacewalk has finally happened. No issues with spacesuits, no malfunctions, all good and proper, and at last, it's great news.
It is great news, yeah, and I thought it was rather poignant that this, we celebrate this milestone only a week after we were talking about the passing of Alexei Leonov, the very first spacewalker. He, I think, would be impressed that for the first time, there's been an active spacewalk on the International Space Station, which was all about actually doing some repair work on the outside of the space station, but by 2 women rather than by either a mixed crew or an all-bloke crew, which is kind of what things were in the days that he was working in space. So the 2 female spacewalkers, Christina Koch and Jessica Mia, they are respectively an electrical engineer and a scientist. Dr. Mia has a doctorate in marine biology, which is a long way from being on the outside of the...
There wouldn't be too many whales and dolphins and whatever else up there.
Well, you never know what you might find up there. But
I suppose as a marine biologist, you can look down on the vastness of Earth and really take it in and get a good scope on what you really love to work with.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, she, flying at 400 kilometres or 350 or thereabouts above the oceans would certainly give you a different perspective on marine biology. Their mission was... and it was actually Friday last week, as we are recording this. Their mission was to replace something called a BCDU, which is It sounds just like a battery. It's a battery charge discharge unit. And that's
okay.
what batteries do, charge and discharge. So BCDU is a good name for it. And it was on the Port 6 truss structure, just to give you your geography of the International Space Station. It's actually right on the end of the space station, actually, where one of those huge sets of solar panels is mounted. There's big sets of solar panels at either end of the main truss of the...
It's also where they eject the space doogies.
Apparently it is, yes, there you go. Somewhere they do that, that's right. What's, I guess, also interesting is that, and I don't think you and I spoke about this, that NASA last week unveiled their new spacesuits for the next lunar mission. Which is
yes. I've actually seen a fair bit of that on Instagram. People have been posting pictures. They look spectacular.
Yeah, they do. The new moonwalking suit, which is called the XEMU, and that's an acronym or a set of initials for the Exploration Extravehicular Mobility Unit. In other words, a suit for astronauts walking on the moon. That is a lot better, a much improved version of what the Apollo astronauts used, and in particular, the emphasis is on the word mobility, because they've changed the structure of this suit and changed the fabrics and the materials used to give much better mobility around the ankles and the knees and actually the shoulders as well. So that we probably won't see as much when the next set of astronauts walk on the moon. We won't see as much of that bunny hopping that we saw.
Yeah, and falling over. They all fell over constantly.
Yeah, pretty well, because the suit itself was not actually very flexible. But what is also interesting about those new spacesuits is that they can be made to fit anybody. Because they're modular in design, so you can actually make one that will customize the fit to whoever's wearing it. And you might remember, I think it was back in March when we were talking about an all-women space walk. The reason why it didn't happen was because they didn't have suits of the right size. They didn't have two spacesuits the right size for these two female astronauts. It was Anne McLean who was the one of the participants. The other one, once again, was Christina Koch. But Anne McLean couldn't make the spacewalk because they didn't have a medium-sized suit there for her. So that problem will be fixed with the new moonwalking suits, which can be made to fit anybody, basically.
Actually,
that would get somebody my length into one.
A little bit of sideline knowledge you probably weren't aware of, Fred, but after the astronauts came back from the moon, they all became champion sack racers because they developed perfect technique.
But they developed that in 1/6 gravity, and that's a lot easier than...
Yes, I'm sure it was. It's interesting talking about suits and developing a suit for moonwalking. Does that basically mean that they're going to have to develop a different suit for every different environment that astronauts will ultimately face? I mean, if and when we eventually walk on Mars, the moon suit may not be right for that environment.
That's absolutely right. It will be quite a different construction, I think, for Mars. The environment on Mars is different in the sense that, first of all, you've got an atmosphere there, even though the pressure is very low. It's enough different from the vacuum on the moon that you would construct it differently. And of course, that means you've also got to have a suit that will survive the wind. It'll survive the particles of fine dust being blown around by the wind. That none of that happens on the moon. So yeah, it will be different. And in fact, when NASA unveiled the new what's it called again? The XEMU suit for moonwalkers last week. They also unveiled a new suit for crew to wear during takeoff and re-entry, because that is again a different kind of suit. And for a start, it's orange, which is just in case there's something untoward happens, either going up or coming down. It means you can find the astronaut very quickly because the orange suit actually stands out very, very much in the landscape. And
probably useless on Mars, though.
No, that's right. Wouldn't be a good place to do that on Mars. You just blend into the background.
Yeah, they'll have to come up with a different colour.
Yeah, bright yellow probably.
Maybe, yeah. No, it's fantastic that they've finally and when you have a delay in a situation in space, regardless of what the vessel is. Like they had that all-female spacewalk planned, but then they had to stop it because of the wardrobe malfunction, and it took 6 months to get it going again. It's just not an easy fix, is it?
No, that's right, and it has to wait for the calendar bit to be right with the personnel that are actually aboard the International Space Station at the time. They did get the privilege of a phone call from the president. But I think that they lost the line somewhere along the road there. So he only had time to ask one question, something like, "How does it feel?" or something like that. Anyway.
Oh, that's what happens. I mean, communications is probably one of the most critical and yet fragile factors of space travel. So, and we certainly witnessed that during the Apollo missions. Australia was quite instrumental in enabling some of those communications, particularly during Apollo 11. So, it's fascinating the way it all comes together. We should again congratulate the astronauts Jessica and Christina for their wonderful historic moment, and something they'll probably never forget.
Oh, but they won't.
So what did you do, Mum? What did you do? Oh, I replaced a battery charge discharge unit. Oh. No, I'm sure it was, parts need to be fixed. That's what it comes down to. You're listening to Space Nuts. Andrew Dunkley here with Fred Watson. Now, let's take a little break and find out more about our sponsor, ExpressVPN, rated #1 by Tech Radar. This is the one I use. I've been using it for a couple of years and I love it. When I joined ExpressVPN, they were brand new to the market, but I read a lot of reviews and did a lot of comparisons. And there was just something about their business model that I particularly liked. And a couple of years down the track, honestly, can't complain. Their interface is very easy to use. Their service is second to none. I've had to contact them a couple of times about certain things that I wanted to do, and they were brilliant. So you may be wondering why I do need a VPN at all. It's all about privacy. Do you really want big tech companies, governments and others knowing what's going on with your online activity? Even if you're having nothing to hide, it just feels downright creepy. I think you'll agree. And governments are getting more and more interested in what you're doing every day. And so, protecting your privacy is what VPN is all about. And how often do you run across websites that you want to get information from only to find that they're geo-blocked? This is becoming an increasing problem, but ExpressVPN solves that problem for you. Now, if you go to our special URL, you'll see quite a list of things this service can help you with, things you may never have thought of before. As I say, it's the one I use, secure, fast, and it just works. So protect yourself online today and find out more about how to get 3 months free at tryexpressvpn.com/space. That's tryexpressvpn.com/space for 3 months free with a 1-year package. Try expressvpn.com/space to learn more, and you'll find the link details in the show notes and on our website. Now, back to the show.
Roger, you're loud and clear here also.
Space Nuts.
It's good to see our YouTube numbers ever expanding. We're almost halfway to 1,000, which would be it would be 500, but we're not there yet. So we're at last count 490 subscribers to our YouTube channel, which is terrific. People are responding. I mean, here's a little secret: just subscribe, and if you don't want to listen on YouTube, you'd prefer to listen on your favourite platform, doesn't matter. I mean, the numbers still stack up. Shh. Anyway, 490 subscribers on YouTube. You can find us at youtube.com/c/spacenuts if you would like to be a YouTube Space Nuts channel subscriber. We're targeting 1,000. That's where we've got to go. Maybe I should subscribe. I wonder if I can. Yeah, I probably can. Yeah. Maybe I already have. I have no idea, Fred. Let's move on to our next topic. I'm subscribed to so much stuff online. I've forgotten half of it, and because I don't like getting too much spam, I've never bothered to sign up for any, information via email. So I'm probably subscribed to all this stuff that I'll never ever see. Now we've talked about this very many times, and that is the event that led to a mass extinction 66 million years ago. We call it the dinosaur asteroid or whatever you like, but there's been a little bit of division in the scientific world as to what exactly caused all the planet's flora and fauna to be virtually wiped out. And some are saying, oh, no, it wasn't an asteroid, it was volcanic, or it was a change in atmosphere, or it was this, it was that. Have they finally figured it out, Fred?
Well, it looks like it, yes. So you're quite right. It has been, a matter of debate. And in fact, some have suggested it was a combination of events, that the asteroid sort of shook up the Earth enough that some of these large-scale volcanoes were able to penetrate through. But it does seem now that it was the asteroid impact itself that gave rise to this mass extinction, rather than something that took a lot longer to eventuate. And what's been the smoking gun, if I can put it that way, on this story is some investigations of the boundary where the geological boundary where the event happened. And you might remember we used to call that the Cretaceous Tertiary boundary. Now seems to be called the Cretaceous Paleogene or Paleogene boundary, which is probably being a bit more specific as to what geological layer that happened in.
Very suspicious lettering too, KPG.
That's right. It was, in fact, the detection of iridium, which is something that is really only found in space objects, iridium within that boundary back in the late 1970s, that really gave rise to the whole theory of the mass extinction by an asteroid impact, that the fact that iridium was seen in that boundary, which had dinosaurs below it and none above it, the iridium was taken to indicate something of extraterrestrial origin, and that theory is now really, I think, quite complete. We've got evidence for a 15-kilometre diameter object hitting in what is now the Gulf of Mexico at a place called Chicxulub, the Chicxulub crater. So that definitely happened. But what remains, I guess, or has remained an open question as to how long after that the giant lizards, the dinosaurs, how long they remained in active life. And whether it was a kind of more instantaneous event. And so the story now turns to, yes, the same geological boundary, but some new evidence that has come from a cave, actually, in the Netherlands. And there is apparently some very good deposits there. It's scientists from Yale University who have led this work, and in fact, the lead author is Michael Hennihan. I think that's how his name is pronounced. He says that in this cave, an especially thick layer of clay from the immediate aftermath of the impact accumulated, which is really quite rare, because so much sediment was laid down there at once. It meant we could extract enough fossils to analyze, and were able to capture the transition. And the bottom line is that the transition is very sudden. he says for years people have suggested that there would be a decrease in ocean pH, and of course pH is a measure of acidity. The lower it is, the more acid the water is. A decrease in ocean pH because the meteor impact hit sulfur-rich rocks and caused the raining out of sulfuric acid. But until now, no one had any direct evidence to show this happened. And so what they've done is they've analysed. Actually, it's the fossils of a tiny plankton in this layer of clay, and can see how the fossil, how the plankton changed in its abundance, and basically he says that before the impact event, they couldn't detect any increasing acidification of the oceans, but in the layers above that, there was this immediate, signal of a much higher acidity in the oceans. The bottom line is that then would prevent, these plankton from growing, and they were basically wiped out effectively at the same time as the dinosaurs. And they're at the bottom of the food chain as well, these things. So the whole ecosystem collapses very, very quickly. Apart from the devastating effect on the atmosphere that the impact itself had. So this is yet more evidence that was a very rapid change in the atmosphere of the Earth. It caused a very rapid change in the flora and fauna of the Earth, and really pins the responsibility for all that on the asteroid rather than the volcanoes that people have suspected might have also contributed.
Aha. Well, there it is. The funny thing is when we started looking at the possibility that it wasn't actually directly a result of the asteroid, and we were looking at other things like volcanic eruptions and atmospheric change because of that, et cetera, a lot of people in the media over the course of the next year or so still referred to the asteroid as being the smoking gun, and now it's all come full circle, and that is in fact the truth. And
yeah, seems to be, that's right.
So even in their inaccuracy, the journalists around the world have been spot on.
Yeah, all that's right. All the evidence is pointing to that. That's exactly right.
Now, you mentioned iridium, the iridium layer, and you found no evidence of dinosaurs above it. So does that mean when paleontologists start sort of kicking around the dirt looking for evidence of past life, that they look for that iridium layer and they know that that is the line of demarcation, if you like?
Yes, that's right. It's that iridium layer is just one of the many layers that are in the rocks of the Earth. They come and go in their intensity in different places. But the thing about the iridium is that it was effectively global. So, in fact, I think it was first investigated in Italy. I've got a photograph of the two scientists who did that, a father and son team. Their surname was Alvarez. It was Lewis was the father, and I think, is it David or Michael? I can't remember. I think it might be David, the son. There's a famous photograph of them standing beside this geological layer. I think it's in a quarry, actually, in Italy. And that was where it was discovered and identified, but it's in many other places as well. And the fact that it's global tells you that the effect of whatever it was, this extraterrestrial source of iridium, it affected the whole world, basically.
Okay. Did we ever give that asteroid a name?
No, I don't think it has got a name. I think it's usually called a dinosaur-killing asteroid. But you could usually it would be called the Chicxulub event, the actual impact itself. So an anonymous asteroid that made a big change here on planet Earth.
Yep, there it is. All bets are off. The asteroid did it.
Yep.
And paid the ultimate price for it too. You're listening to the Space Nuts podcast, episode 176. I'm Andrew Dunkley with Fred Watson.
0G, and I feel fine.
Space Nuts.
Once again, Fred, if people would like to join us on Patreon, they can do that through our Patreon account, patreon.com/spacenuts. If you are so willing to part with a few dollars a month to contribute to the Space Nuts podcast, you can do that. We've got 62 patrons now, Fred. It's just inching up week by week, which is lovely. So thank you for your contribution. It is much appreciated, and it is going to a good cause. It is the Hugh Drury Superannuation Fund. Hugh being our producer. No, it's being used to keep us afloat, basically. And every dollar you put in is greatly appreciated, and we think you're wonderful. Patreon.com/spacenuts is the website if you want to pop along and just take a look. It's not for everybody, and we're not making it a thing, but if it's something you'd like to do, then wonderful. We appreciate it very much.
With Kroger brand products from Baker's, you can make all your favorite things this holiday season. Because Kroger brand's proven quality products come at exceptionally low prices. And with a money-back quality guarantee, every dish is sure to be a favorite.
These are a few of my favorite things.
Whether you shop delivery, pickup, or in-store, Kroger brand has all your favorite things. Baker's, fresh for everyone.
Now to some questions, Fred. Now this is interesting. We've got 4 questions from 3 people via 2 presenters in one segment. I don't know how I worked that out, but we'll go to the first question. This one comes from Chris. I don't know any more than that, except that it's Chris. I don't know where Chris is from, but his name is Chris. So hi, Chris. Thanks for the question. His question is about the expanding universe. Love your show. Always been a big space nut and science nerd myself. I have many questions regarding the expanding universe. In the brief amount of reading I've done, it appears that the Hubble constant has changed over the lifespan of the universe. It also appears that gravity is a major influence. With the universe expanding and that expansion increasing, does that mean that the parsec unit of measure is also changing? Or would it stay the same as other measures also change, i.e. the AU, as in the Earth is expanding away from the Sun? In other words, would the distance to a star measured in parsecs remain constant as the distance measured in light years increases? Moving on from the idea of a uniform expansion, is it possible that the universe might be expanding at different rates or even contracting in areas based upon the local gravity environment, and the Hubble constant is not constant but actually variable? Regards, Chris. Oh, I love this question. I love both of the questions. Just, it makes you really, it turns your brain upside down.
It does. It does. Okay, so the first, it's a really good question. Is the parsec as a unit of measure changing? Let me just explain what a parsec is. It's actually how we measure distances in interstellar space. So if you're measuring distances for the planets, you can do that more directly. We understand from the way planets orbit around the sun what distances are involved, and that was what Johannes Kepler sorted out at the beginning of the 17th century. But for the distances of the stars, we use a unit. In common parlance, we use the light year, but astronomers actually use the parsec. And a distance of 1 parsec corresponds to an object that has a parallax of 1 arc second, 1 second of arc. Now, a second of arc is a very small angle. It's 1/3600th of a degree. It's the size of a dime or a dollar coin held up at 5 kilometers or 3 miles or thereabouts. It's a very, very small angle indeed. But what does parallax mean? It means that you look at the way the position of an object seems to change as the Earth goes around the Sun in its orbit. And so the Earth's orbit is 300 million kilometers in diameter. We actually don't take the full diameter, though. The parallax is defined as measured from the null position. In other words, when the Earth is kind of directly in line with the Sun when you're looking at the object in question. I'm not explaining this very well. Let me go back and do it a different way. If you imagine the position of a star seen from one side of the Earth's orbit, and then 6 months later from the other side of the Earth's orbit, that gives you twice the radius of the Earth's orbit as being the baseline. And we take the radius of the Earth's orbit as the baseline to define a parallax of 1 arc second, in other words, a parsec. I don't know whether you get that, but anyway.
My brain just went numb.
It's the angle subtended from the star by the radius of the Earth's orbit. Okay.
Right.
That's, if you imagine yourself now on the star, looking back at the Earth's orbit, the radius of the Earth's orbit is 1 arc second as seen from the star. That's how you define a parsec, the distance of a parsec. Now, we astronomers think that's too hard for people to get their heads around. So
really? You
traditionally,
think that?
traditionally, we've converted it into light years, and it's about 3.3 light years, 3.26, I think is the number, light years in a parsec. And a light year, of course, is the distance light travels in 1 year. It's 9.5 trillion kilometers. But it's not a distance. A light year is not something we actually use in astronomy. The fundamental measurement is in parsecs. And that, just coming back to the question, does the parsec as a unit of measure change? And the answer is no, it doesn't, because that's the distance that we measure. It's the distance of the object that's changing. And whether you're measuring that in parsecs or light years, and a light year, remember, is just derived from a parsec, because there's no way we can actually measure a light year. You need somebody with a stopwatch and one side of the object or a distant object, and somebody on Earth with another stopwatch. We can't do that. That's impossible. So light years don't really exist as a fundamental unit, but parsecs do, and they can be measured. So just hang on a minute, because a man's just walked in with a vacuum cleaner. He's a good friend of mine, and I should hang a note on the door saying recording a podcast, but never mind.
Fred's
it's all right.
doing a vacuum experiment.
Yeah, that's okay.
Well, actually, we've just done the podcast in a vacuum.
Yeah, we all do it in a vacuum, don't we? There's certainly a vacuum of anything intelligible coming out. So, sorry, going back to Chris's question, measuring distances in parsecs. We can only do that for objects within our own galaxy directly, and in fact, only out to a distance of, something like 1,000 light years or 3,000 light years or thereabouts is as far as we can measure. There's a spacecraft called Gaia, which is measuring these distances by parallax with exquisite precision. But that's all within our own galaxy. To work out the distance to other galaxies, and hence to look at the expansion of the universe, you have to use secondary distance indicators. And usually we use variable stars called Cepheid variables. They give us the distance to the nearest galaxies. And then we use other factors beyond that to work out what the distance scale is. So the universe is expanding, but our yardsticks aren't. The yardsticks that we use, and principally it's the parsec, that is not expanding. Okay. I hope that answers the question. It was a very garbled account. But let's tackle the second part of
Part 2, about whether or not it's all expanding all the time, or if parts of it aren't expanding as fast or maybe contracting because of the effects of gravity.
Yes, that's right. So Chris's question, you've paraphrased it well, but let me read it. Is it possible that the universe might be expanding at different rates or even contracting in areas based upon the local gravity environment? And the answer to that is probably yes. Because we know that we are not looking at the whole universe when we use our big telescopes to probe deep into space. There's at least one horizon beyond which we can't see, and that's the look back time to the Big Bang. That means that you've got this sort of curtain, I often call it the cosmic wallpaper, this background, which everything that we can measure is in front of. And certainly out to that look back time, 13.8 billion years, the universe seems to be expanding at the same way in all directions. It's isotropic. So the expansion that we measure seems to be the case for all of the observable universe, the bit of the universe that we can observe. But some scientists have argued that the universe might go on forever. It's much bigger than we can see. And there may be other parts of it that are actually contracting, exactly as Chris has suggested. So it is possible. But to all intents and purposes, the only thing we can measure is the universe that we can observe, and that seems to be expanding ever more rapidly with the Hubble constant changing as we go into the future.
If I could add my own piece of ludicrous theory to this, imagine our universe is a balloon and it's expanding, and there are other universes around ours that are also expanding and they're pushing into each other. That would stand to reason that in some parts of our universe it's expanding, in other parts it may be contracting because of the pressure from an external universe expanding on us.
Or yes, that's assuming that external universes can have some impact on our own universe, and that's certainly not clear. It is possible that that's true, and people are looking at things like the cosmic microwave background radiation, the cosmic wallpaper, in great detail to see if there's any evidence of this sort of pushing and shoving. But if you've got all the other universes in the multiverse in the fifth or sixth or seventh dimension, it may not be that they would have any influence on our own universe. The one hint that maybe they do is that gravity is such a weak force compared with the other fundamental forces of nature. Some people have suspected that that's because gravity leaks out into some sort of hyperspace, and that might then impinge on other universes. But this is all very much in the realm of speculation.
Of course, we're assuming that other universes are separate from our own. There are other theories that they all overlap.
Yeah, and that maybe we're all just looking at one universe, but it's got different bits, some of which are expanding, some are contracting, maybe some have different fundamental physical constants, sort of, along the lines that Chris is suggesting. So it's a good suggestion.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chris. Great question. Really good question. Loved it. Let's move on to the question of Venus. We've had a couple of people respond to last week's episode about Venus. One of those, and these are similar questions, but I'll do them separately so we can tackle one and then the other because there might be a different angle on the answers. This one comes from Ash Rose. Awesome podcast. I only just discovered it and look forward to catching up with all episodes. No, sorry, the last one you listened to was the end. So what you're hearing now is just a myth. Question. Is the fact that both Mars and Venus both lack magnetic fields the reason why they both became hostile to garnering life, maintaining water and continental plates? Venus has had a gas explosion, much like what we've seen in the Siberian traps. Mars once had a strong magnetosphere, keeping its atmosphere intact. Is it down to having the right mix of heavy metal cores?
Okay, so are you going to go on to the other Venus question and lump them all together?
Why not? This one comes from Alan Lang. Alan asks, why does Venus have no magnetic field, retrograde rotation, no plate tectonics, and much less water than Earth? Because they didn't pay their taxes. I would argue that these features cause the runaway greenhouse effect, and volcanism is a byproduct of the lack of plate tectonics. Thank you for your show and your sister programs. He's talking about space-time with Stuart Gary, of course.
Yeah. I think these are both really interesting questions, and they kind of probe the limits of knowledge, really, because in some ways we know more about Mars than Venus in this regard. Mars doesn't have a magnetic field. There is some evidence that once it did, because there are places where there are hints that, of magnetism that may be the result of plate tectonics that shut down. So you've got magnetism occurring along the boundaries of the tectonic plates, and the reason why we think the plate tectonics shut down on Mars is because of this. It's not got the right amount of, it's not really so much the right mix of heavy metals in the core. Excuse me, it's the mass of the core. Mars probably does have a metallic core, but it's a much smaller body than the Earth. It's only half the diameter of the Earth. And so the suspicion is that it's cooled much more rapidly, and that has shut down plate tectonics. Now, the evidence of the lack of plate tectonics is not just what we can look at. It also comes from the InSight lander, which is sitting on Mars's surface with a very sensitive seismometer, which is certainly picking up Mars quakes, but they're not at the level that you would expect if there were any kind of plate tectonics going on. So that activity seems to be completely shut down. Mars seems to have a single continuous crust. That's borne out as well by the fact that it's got this gigantic volcano, Olympus Mons, 27 kilometers high, which suggests that the crust of Mars stayed stationary over a hotspot down in the mantle of Mars, allowing that volcano to build up to its current height. Unlike the equivalent volcanoes on Earth, which is the shield volcanoes in Hawaii, which are dotted along, the direction in which the continental plate or the crustal plate was moving over the hotspot that formed them. So that's all sort of fairly clear. So Mars, it seems to be the small size of Mars that has caused it to lose its atmosphere or lose most of its atmosphere because of the shutdown in plate tectonics, not replenishing the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, shutting down the carbon cycle, in fact. Now, Venus is a different object. We don't actually know for certain whether Venus has plate tectonics or not. The assumption is that it doesn't. But it does have more volcanoes on its surface than any other object in the solar system. We think they're all extinct, but the fact that it has this clearly a past history of extreme volcanism suggests that perhaps it did have plate tectonics, which have now shut down. But the reason for that is less obvious than it is with Mars, because Venus is the same size as the Earth. And it does indeed have this runaway greenhouse effect on the in the atmosphere of the planet, a very hot temperature, 450 or 460 degrees Celsius, and the absence, as exactly as Ash says, of a magnetic shield. Nothing to shield the atmosphere from this bombardment by the subatomic particles of the sun. So I think Venus is more of a puzzle than Mars is. We've got some evidence, and you and I have talked about this, that perhaps perhaps Venus was once warm and wet. People have modelled the atmosphere of Venus and suggested that perhaps in the distant past it could have supported life. What happened to change that, we don't know. And we don't know too much about the core of Venus either. Because of the fact that it doesn't seem to be able to sustain plate tectonics, unless plate tectonics are ongoing and we're just not seeing the evidence of it. A lot of the problem is the fact that Venus has got this very thick and opaque atmosphere around it. So the only way you can really sense what's going on is by having radar measurements, and for that you need to put spacecraft in orbit around Venus.
Yeah, and our observation capability of Venus is very limited. Visually, it's just this big yellow faffy thing. Radar is fairly limited, and putting something on the surface is not going to survive long because of the extreme heat. There's just so many factors that make Venus an ongoing mystery.
Yes, a difficult planet to explore. That's right. So the hope is that we will, as time goes on, we'll learn more about Venus. We spoke, was it last week, about the lava flows on Venus that turn out to be granitic rather than basaltic, and that's suggesting that there wasn't much water around when those lava flows took place. So, yeah, great questions, which we really are at the frontiers of knowledge. We're not really capable yet of answering them. We can hazard a guess in the case of Mars, but Venus, as we've said, is much more of a mystery.
Okay. And thank you to Ash and Alan for sending in those questions about Venus, and we appreciate it. It's always good to try and investigate new possibilities and open our minds to what you're thinking. So thanks again. What was the name of your cleaner?
Well, that's a really poignant question, because Ruben, who was our cleaner for a number of years. I got to know him really well. He's a Chilean gentleman. He was full of beans, full of life, but sadly passed away about 2 months ago. I was at his funeral. It was very, very sad. So I haven't had time yet to form a relationship with our new cleaner, who no doubt is feeling embarrassed because he walked in on a podcast, but he doesn't know that. But
the reason I ask is because I was just going to recognise him, but I remember a mate of mine I worked in radio with years and years ago used to work for one of the stations in Canberra, and they had a cleaner that used to come in every afternoon. Now, they told him time and time again, don't go in there, that's the live-to-air studio, but he just didn't get it. So he just used to burst in while they were on air, whether the microphone was on or not. He became a part of the show. And
of course.
That's my inspiration for leaving stuff in. That story, I thought to myself, well, I hope that happens to me one day. And there it is.
Well, you get...
I tend to do that. If people walk in the radio station and I'm on air with the mic open, I just let it go because it just adds to the fun. So I love that story. Also reminds me of a story of a new radio station that was using touch screens for the first time some 20 or 30 years ago up in Queensland, and a cleaner came in and used spray on the screen and gave it a wipe, and they were off air for 2 weeks. That's an absolute ripper. One more thing before we finish up. We have a Space Nuts shop, Fred.
Oh, well, I didn't know that. That's an astonishing
If you go to, I've got to find the URL now, bitesz, bitesz.com/space nuts. You'll find all our episodes there as well. But if you scroll down, you can contact us via that. We have a communications satellite on our... No, we don't. We have an interface where you can ask questions via our website. But we've got product. So if you want to... We get a lot of people saying, gee, I'd love to get a Space Nuts T-shirt. We have them. They are there. You can buy a Space Nuts T-shirt from the Space Nuts shop. You can also... Fred doesn't know this. You can also buy Cosmic Chronicles.
Oh, well, that's good news.
Yep. There are links to your books on our page. There are also links to my books. I've been looking since they've been on there. No clicks. But
so I've just I've just clicked on the website that you've just given me, and I've got a big yellow screen that says warning, potential security risk ahead. That's
funny. I did the same thing that says your connection is not private. I'll get onto our producer. He's obviously not using the Patreon money.
Yes, to keep the licenses updated.
Exactly. So anyway, we'll get that fixed. But yeah. You can log on there and buy product if you so desire. The links to all the books and where you can get them, and there it is.
Stuff. That's
you'll probably sell nearly 1 million via the website, Fred, I would imagine. Get yourself a bestseller.
So. 1 million would cheer me up very, very much.
Would cheer me up too. Yeah. Anyway, thank you as always, Fred. It's been a great pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Andrew. Good to talk to you too, and we'll do Space Nuts again next week, probably.
I do hope so. And thank you for listening. As always, we really appreciate the feedback. Keep it coming, and we'll catch you next time on another edition of Space Nuts.
Space Nuts. You've been listening to the Space Nuts podcast.
Mission complete, Houston.
Subscribe to the full podcast on iTunes and Stitcher or your favourite podcast distributor. This has been another quality podcast production from bitesz.com.
With Kroger brand products from Baker's, you can make all your favorite things this holiday season. Because Kroger brand's proven quality products come at exceptionally low prices. And with a money-back quality guarantee, every dish is sure to be a favorite.
These are a few of my favorite things.
Whether you shop delivery, pickup, or in-store, Kroger brand has all your favorite things. Baker's, fresh for everyone.